Hello and welcome back to Field Notes Podcast. I'm your host Eden, and thank you for joining me in today's episode. I'm excited to chat with you today about something that came up as a topic of discussion between a friend of mine and I think it's a really common question / sticky point that people encounter on the manifestation journey or in the process of trying to bring something into reality and trying to create a new experience in your life. If you're trying to get somewhere, maybe you conceive of it as your healing journey or your journey to even manifest something like an internal state. And this is the question of, am I going backwards? Like, what's going on? A lot of times when we are in a process of working to bring a specific new reality or manifestation or internal state of being into reality, frequently on that journey, we will experience setbacks. We will experience moments that feel very challenging, moments where we feel like we have gotten thrown back into a past version of ourselves, moments where something we thought that we had handled or we had mastered or we had overcome, whether inwardly or outwardly, comes to manifest again on that journey, oftentimes numerous times. So how do we understand these moments? How do you figure out if you're going backwards or if you're making meaningful progress? And how can we keep moving closer to what it is that we desire? So the first thing I want to distinguish is the difference between moving backwards and feeling stuck, because these may on the surface seem like the same thing, but they are very different. And I think it's very important for the conversation of understanding if we're moving backwards and reframing the idea that we're moving backwards or feeling like we're moving backwards. It's important to clarify and differentiate that from the feeling of being stuck. So I'm going to describe the two states so that you can map yourself onto them and feel into where you might be if you're going through one of these experiences. So feeling stuck, I would describe in my personal experience and my experience working with clients and my own personal journey, is feeling stuck is when you feel like nothing is changing. You feel like you are taking action or you're trying to shift something in your life, but it doesn't feel like anything is meaningfully changing over a long period of time. So you feel like you are exerting effort in some way, whether it's just through your actions, whether you are really working on a particular trigger or inner challenge or inner emotional experience that you're having, but you feel like over time, over a long period of time, it just doesn't seem like anything is changing. So that, for me, I would put more into the box of feeling stuck. On the other hand, we have this feeling that can feel like moving backwards. You have this feeling like you are making meaningful progress, like you are taking action. It feels like there's movement. It feels like there's change. It feels like there is progression towards the thing that you are trying to bring into reality. But then all of a sudden, something happens and you all of a sudden feel transported into maybe the quote unquote old version of you, or you feel so like low energy one day, or you feel sick one day, or you feel like you completely lose steam for like 5 days or something, or you have a challenging experience with someone, a relationship in your life, or an unexpected trigger hits you out of nowhere, and before you know it, it's like you feel like flat out on your back, like you were laid out by the universe or by your higher power or whatever it might be, and you feel back to square one. You feel like you're back to square one, and like you feel discouraged because it feels like all the progress you are making, it feels like it vanished in the blink of an eye, and like you're back to this old way of being, this old way of feeling, thinking, behaving, etc. So we have now kind of this general experience of being stuck, feeling like you're chipping away, you're trying, you're in this feeling of like, I really want that. I'm trying so hard, but nothing's really happening, or it feels like nothing's manifesting outwardly. And then we have, okay, it feels like there's movement, churning, there's little signs that things are shifting, but then out of nowhere, you feel like that old self and you're like, WTF just happened, and it may take you a certain amount of time to get kind of back in the saddle, or to feel like you can begin generating the energy to start moving forwards again towards that goal. Now, there's also kind of this like third state, which kind of falls into the category of feeling stuck, but it can also have this texture moving backwards. And this is, again, just important to articulate so that you can get this full energetic landscape of like what's really happening. So back to this bucket of when we're feeling stuck and you're feeling like trying, exerting energy, things feel heavy, things feel hard, nothing feels like it's changing. But on the day-to-day, it's kind of like a mild energetic feel. It's not like energizing. It doesn't feel like you're getting those dopamine hits from seeing the moments of small transformation or small shifts. It's more of an experience of trudging, and it feels very neutral to negative. It feels hard, feels heavy. Sometimes combined with that, you will also then have these acute triggering moments or days or relationship dynamics that again kind of lay you out within that process of feeling stuck, and you within that sort of overall texture of feeling stuck additionally feel this layer of like, wow, I've been trudging up this hill to try and get to this new place. I'm not feeling energized because I'm not seeing a lot of results from it. And then on top of that, this thing's hitting me out of nowhere that is completely laying me out and making me feel like it's dropping me to an even lower place where I'm like really questioning and feeling like nothing is getting better at all. So we have this picture. In this episode, what I'm going to focus on is the second one that I described, which is this bucket where you're seeing movement, even if it's not to the level that you would like, you can still look back and track incremental shifts or development. Either you're building a certain skill, or you're building the capacity for something, or you're taking tangible steps towards something, or all of the above, or you're really working on a particular wound, or you're even in the process of trying to understand what wound or thing is at play here. And then something happens where you're set back, or you feel set back. Before I get into some ways that I recommend reframing this, and yes, I'm going to soothe your concern and your worry that you're moving backwards right off the bat, whether you're in any of these three bins or some combination of them that I just described. The first thing we have to do is understand that you really can never move backwards in the process of trying to manifest a new reality or a new experience or an internal state of being. Yes, we can revisit previously visited terrain again to make sure we've really traversed that terrain and learned everything there is to learn about that terrain. But we can never really go backwards, nor do I believe can we slow down the process of bringing something new into being. And I believe this is the case because no matter where you are in your process, whether you're feeling stuck and it feels like you are trudging up a mountain and it feels like you are making incremental progress, you are still making so much invisible progress during that time. There is still so much invisible growth happening within your nervous system, within the architecture of your neurology. Yes, it might not be visible apparently in this moment, but you are building nervous system capacity, you are building skills, you are building resilience to be able to ultimately get closer to what it is you're trying to go do. I firmly believe that. I do not believe that we're ever moving backwards or putting something off that could have happened faster. I think there's always meaning and purpose to exactly how long it might take you to get where you're trying to go. So I say all that to say, I don't believe you're ever moving backwards. Even if it's been 15 years or 20 years in a marriage that you have been thinking about leaving for 20 of those 20 years and you have not done anything about it, just by the very nature of you contemplating it, turning it over, considering it, having conversations about it, holding it in your mind, talking to people about it, all of that does work on the issue on a deeper level. And I think a lot of times we see progress as like the day the breakthrough happened, or the moment everything came into being, or even a year where a lot of pieces fell into place. But it wasn't that those things miraculously happened in that moment or month or even year. None of those things could have manifested if it wasn't for all the years prior where you were chipping away and trudging through the mud and slowly building the capacity to tolerate challenging emotions and the resilience in your nervous system to ultimately get you to what that outcome looked like. So no, I don't think you can ever move backwards. That being said, do I think you can feel insanely stuck sometimes? Absolutely. I've been there. There's still areas of my life that feel really confusing, or that feel like the progress is very slow. And I have some other episodes on that, the how to get out of a funk, and if you're stuck in indecision. There's been a few in the last 6 months that kind of speak to that. But now I want to get into some shifts and ways of seeing this experience of okay, but I'm making so much progress, it's feeling great, and then it's feeling terrible. What do I make of that? What do I make of the fact that I feel like I just lost a week's worth of progress because I've been making all these gains and then suddenly I'm just out of commission? First, I want to talk about sort of the nervous system and neurological component to bringing something new into reality. Most of the time, pretty much all the time, I'm trying to think of an example where this wouldn't be the case, but most of the time, when we're trying to bring something new into reality, however you picture that future self that has something that you don't have, that future self that embodies something that maybe you don't feel like your current self does, or this version of you that is doing something in the world that your current self isn't currently doing, or the version of you that is in a relationship that you don't currently have. Or maybe it's the version of you in your current relationship, but taking your current relationship to the next level, wishing the dynamic was different in your relationship. All these things, maybe it's the way you show up at work, or a different career path, or whatever it might be. You're really empowered around something that you didn't feel empowered around before. All these things speak to a new experience, a new way of being. And a new way of being does not happen without undergoing a transformation in the way that we experience ourselves and the way that we experience our lives. That transformation requires the nervous system. It requires transforming on a neurological level the way that we literally engage with the world, namely the way we engage with specific relationship dynamics. We need to transform. For example, maybe you're wanting a relationship that's on a level that you have never experienced before. In order for that to become your reality, you have to change the way that your brain experiences other people. A, that's not going to happen overnight. B, that's not going to happen without some serious heavy lifting on the level of your actual nervous system and neurology. Same thing goes with like a career example. Like maybe you really want to be really confident at presenting slide decks and you want to be a manager at the corporation where you work. Suddenly going from being the person in the meeting who never speaks and is not confident to being a person who commands attention and authority and has all this natural, effortless charisma, that's not going to happen unless you change the way you navigate relationship dynamics. You're going to have to break long-standing patterns. You are going to have to put a lot of energy towards that. I say all this to say this mechanism through which change is happening is the reason why we can feel like we are going backwards from time to time when we're in the process of trying to bring something into reality. And it's not the only reason why, but I think it's one reason why we can feel like we're going backwards. And I think that what this looks like is when we're trying to bring this new reality into our life, we are going to, as a byproduct of that quest, we're going to have to take a lot of action. We're going to have to do a lot of things that are outside the sort of window that our nervous system has previously registered as like safe, as familiar, as default. The ways of being in relationship, maybe that's constantly worrying about whether the person is going to text you. It's constantly going out of your way to be really useful to them and to do things for them so that they see you as valuable and they want you to stay in their life. Those are the patterns that your nervous system has currently registered are safe, A+, check mark. Let's keep doing that because this is the baseline. This is what I have learned is my way of operating within reality. And it's like our bodies take that as law. They take that as the law. To step out of that feels scary. And it's outside of that window of tolerance. It's outside of what feels comfortable, familiar, congruent with who we see ourselves to be. Pushing out of that, you're changing your neural pathways, and you're also asking your nervous system to tolerate higher amounts of stress. Because in order to walk into the boardroom really confidently and not anxiously hunch your shoulders over and seek out eye contact to make sure everyone's approving of you, to walk in calm and collected and not be scanning the room for a threat, you're asking your nervous system to tolerate a way of being that it has previously found to be intolerable or too scary. That takes a lot of energy. So when we're in the process of bringing something new into creation and we are pushing that limit, so maybe it's like you are not leaning into all these micro patterns in your relationship where you would typically try and get that anxious attachment soothed. And you're not going out of your way to do all these things that you used to do. You're not being the one to constantly reach out to create connection or create reassurance. And you're going along and you're doing this. And maybe you're going and working on other parts of your life. In other words, when you have been in a prolonged period of pushing out of your default patterns, the patterns that are familiar and that register as safety to your nervous system, and especially after taking a big step outside of that normal threshold, that normal capacity, you will experience a come down. You will experience a crash out because your system has reached how much it can tolerate. Your system has reached the amount of stress, the amount of newness, the amount of new neurological processing that it can do before it needs to collapse and it needs to integrate that new experience. And I think the bigger the step outside of that proverbial comfort zone, like the bigger the step is towards the new quote unquote reality or new experience or the new thing we're trying to do, the more scary it feels. Like the more stressed out you were during that event, that moment of stepping out of your comfort zone, the bigger the come down, the more significant the crash out is going to be. And when that crash out hits, you are going to feel like you're going backwards because your body is saying, I have reached my threshold for this new experience that we're trying to create. I cannot take in any more information or push any further beyond my current nervous system capacity. I'm going to now revert to my baseline. I'm going to go back into my normal. I'm even going to go down below my normal kind of day-to-day baseline because my energy reserves are like literally empty. I have to replenish myself. And depending on how big of a step or big of a push that was, or how far you went outside of your sort of capacity, that is how long it's going to take for your body to get back into the rhythm. I think this is so important to understand because we need to understand when we're trying to create a new experience, a new reality, a new way of being, that your body, brain, and nervous system cannot endlessly charge towards manifesting the new reality. There has to be these collapse points where your nervous system, brain can take that load off from trying to break these patterns, from trying to lay down new ways of behaving, of speaking, of relating to people, of being in the world, new actions that you're taking. It needs to have that moment of taking that burden off, that load off, so that it can encode all the progress you've been making up until that point. When I started to pay attention to this for myself, I started to notice that after those quote unquote crash outs, or after those quote unquote days where I just could not, maybe I was really working towards something, and then for a couple of days or a week, I just could not even think about it. I almost like the thought of it would make me sick to my stomach. The thought of working on myself or working on the particular trigger or taking action, I just needed to completely veg out because I was giving my brain a rest from having to do this work. And my brain needed a rest because it needed to encode all of the progress that I had been making up until that point. And after my body naturally concluded that rest period, I was totally ready to bounce back, and not only bounce back, but actually resume attacking the new creation with renewed energy, and actually with more skill, and having literally integrated the learnings from the last push period, or whatever you might want to call it. If you listen to any of my episodes on German New Medicine, which I talk about in my eczema healing journey, this goes hand in hand with understanding the way that our biology is always trying to adapt to the problems that we are engaged with. So maybe you stepped out of your comfort zone to confront your boss about something, and in that discussion, you were probably in fight or flight. You were in a period of prolonged sympathetic nervous system activity. You then had to have a crash out because you were coming out of this heightened state of prolonged stress where your body was trying to adapt to the conflict that you perceived yourself to be in. And do you ever notice how after you do that, you overcome the challenge, or you set the boundary, or you have the conversation, you have maybe a little crash out after, but after that, you are more equipped. You have developed the resilience. It's almost like you have developed the callus. Your body, your brain has encoded a more adaptive way of facing that same conflict or threat in the future. It's just like if you're a performer. The first time you probably ever performed, you probably were really nervous. Your heart's racing. Your body was handling that experience as if it was something really scary. But as you do it, that response goes away and your body adapts to doing it. So much so that by the time you've been, doing it for 10 years, you've been dancing the Nutcracker for 10 years, It's literally not even a thing anymore to go out on stage and do the waltz of the flowers. So we can understand the manifestation of a new reality experience, relationship dynamic, way of being, internal state the same way. By the time that thing actually lands into our life, it will have become neutral to your nervous system. It will have become an event that is no longer perceived as scary, threatening, exciting, out of your normal kind of baseline set point. But the process of getting there is one where you have these pushes of growth, and then you have these collapses where your brain and your body and your psyche need to organize that information and re-encode it and refilter it through your body, literally integrating it into your being so that the next wave, you have more of that embodied. So I say all this to say, this is permission to embrace the quote unquote setbacks. When you feel like you're going backwards, you're not actually going backwards. It's actually evidence that you are moving forwards. Now, it's a different thing if every single day you're having this experience because you're not meaningfully moving through the material, the scary emotions or negative emotions, or your body and brain and nervous system lack the resources to be able to metabolize the new experiences that you are trying to have and create. That's a different thing. But if you are moving through them meaningfully and you are slowly developing that callus and that resilience, these moments when you feel like you went backwards or you feel like all of a sudden your progress, you have this big crash out after you have the fight with the person and you finally say how you feel. And maybe it came out a little more harsh and a little more disorganized than you would have liked, but it's still registered to your nervous system as a moment of huge growth where you overcame an obstacle that previously you would not have overcome, like maybe just speaking how you really feel or something like that. You are going to have these setback moments. And when you can wrap your mind around this, you can actually support your body and your brain to be able to move through these phases with more ease. Like when I'm going through this and I notice, oh my gosh, like I've been pushing all week with the podcast, getting the video online and all this new content that I'm making, and I'm having total brain overload on Sunday night. I know I need to get more sleep because sleep is when our body repairs. I need to stop trying to push. I need to stop trying to push doing more or learning more information. Like I do not try and push through that kind of feeling of fatigue or like I just can't take anymore. That's literally my brain being like, I've reached my limit of what I can take in, what I can work on. I'm not going to do an emotional processing, inner child meditation or anything like that. I'm literally resting my brain, doing things that are really easy on my system. I'm going to sleep early. I'm just trying to keep it chill, not do anything that's going to, stress me out more. And then before you know it, the next morning after a full night's sleep or after a couple of days of resting, I'm back even more fully than I was before because that push, that extra push that I was exerting to work on editing more than I've ever edited before. I made more reels than I've ever edited in one day before. I actually, in accomplishing that, I actually gained new powers in a way. It's like it gives you more powers. It's literally strengthening you. It's strengthening different neural pathways. And after the rest period, I'm like, I'm back and stronger than ever. Like, let me do even more reels than I did last time. Okay, I will leave us there for today. I hope that if you have been being hard on yourself because you're working so hard and you're taking so much action and making so much progress towards what you really want, but you, yes, still have days where you're bedridden or you're exhausted or you take a week off of working on anything because you're just tired. I hope that this gives you a little bit of understanding and permission and grace around the biological organism that you are, which still requires time to integrate the changes that we are making in our nervous system and in our brain when we are working to create something new. All right. Thank you so much for listening. If you have questions, if this brought up any further thoughts, ideas, questions, or topics, you can leave them as a comment on the YouTube video, or you can submit a question via the link in the podcast description, or you can send me it via DM on Instagram at field__notespod. And other than that, thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you in the next one.